Welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with Roko and Michelle and our super special guest, Kristi Beaufore. Am I right? Beaufore. I've got to
right.
on that
Beautiful
stuff.
four.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
For always and all time. So Kristi and Roko and I used to work together at Sutter Health. Kristi is an operations executive still with the foundation, and you were in leadership with the foundation when we met. I don't even know how many years ago that was. We've had you on the podcast.
A long time.
It's been a minute. So Kristi has graciously agreed to be part of our series that we're doing now around leadership lessons, and this look back around pivotal moments in your leadership career, defining moments that may be things that if you could do it over, if you look back, and want to do over, had your magic wand for the day. And just all around stuff that, if you're looking back at your, younger self, I was going to say former self, but younger self, I know I have changed and more. What advice would you give? So that's kind of the theme of this series that we're doing. And so thank you for being part of this. We aligned on a quote that we're going to kick off with, and I'm hoping I put it somewhere that I can look at. Yeah, here it is. Nobody comes into this world being perfect. We all stumble, but it's how we learn and grow from our stumbles that defines our journey. And so when I think about that and the stuff that we're talking about, we are perfectly imperfect beings. And I think part of it is for us to be like honest with ourselves and open with ourselves about those opportunities that exist, and not show up with this massive misconception that we have to be perfect, especially as we're stepping into leadership roles. And so for me, that's what that means, is permission to go, you know what, this isn't this that we're going to hit out of the gate. But what does that look like? And I'm gonna go back to Margie. What's a little bit better look like when we're talking about developing ourselves and role modeling what that development path looks like to set reasonable expectations for other people? So thank you. What's on your mind?
While you were talking, I was thinking there's also a big part of this is reflection. So when you are looking at yourself, through that leadership lens and having that self-awareness, a lot of that comes from that self-reflection. Are you reflecting back on, even if it's just a quick interaction that you had with somebody, do you pause later to look back and say, did I show up the way I wanted to show up? What did I ask? How did that person perceive? Kind of also maybe thinking about feedback. But reflection, I think, is kind of, in my mind, the best way to say, am I being perfectly imperfect, as you would say, and then where are my opportunities, and how am I going to do that differently the next time?
Yeah.
You shared offline a story of when that pivotal moment came for you with that self-awareness. What was that story again for our listeners?
Early on in my, I call it leadership in quotes, because it was that first frontline leadership role, and I thought I knew everything. And I really came into, I think, every single day saying, I'm going to tell everybody how to do their work, and I know better. And never being open to what anybody was telling me, and zero self-awareness or reflection. And it got really to the point for me where I had to leave, because I had become a person that I didn't even want to be around. And so the best way for me at that point was to leave. And as I was leaving, one of the physicians said, I think that there's an opportunity in leadership for you. I really do. I can see it, but here's emotional intelligence, and gave me that book. And I read that. It's still with me. I carry it everywhere. I go back to it very often, but I reflect on that moment probably at least once a month, because it was so pivotal. And I share that with any new leader, so that everybody is aware that we all stumble. We all we don't come into leadership going, yeah, I'm great, I'm going to do this perfect. That was just super pivotal moment for me.
You know, it's interesting you say that, you know, and I know we talked a little bit just about direction and thinking, you know, as far as pulling up quotes. But when I think about that, what you said, and it hit me, is that I was a person I didn't even want to be around. So at some level, I have to imagine, Kristi, that you knew inside that how you were showing up and how this was happening wasn't ideal, wasn't the best, wasn't the anything. And the sense that I have is you didn't have a path out of it.
Yeah, it's probably a great way to put it at the time. You know, when I had begun the journey, the manager that I had at the time had changed. And I did not have a great relationship with that manager. She didn't come into it as somebody who was a teacher or a mentor. So that barrier was immediately put up, and I didn't really have a path. And I actually even stepped away from leadership for a bit after that, thinking maybe I had made a wrong decision. And it was through a lot of self-reflection, reading, talking with those around me that I'd worked with, even at that time when I was a horrible person, that brought me back.
Yeah. It's so funny what we pick up when you were telling the story. So, you know, I love, Michelle, what you just brought up. When you were telling the story, what I was picking up was that relationship piece of it, where you had a lesson around how to lead in that moment, but instead of just keeping that to yourself and developing yourself around that, what I heard you say is you share that story and how you now lead, and you share even the emotional intelligence book with the leaders that you're developing. And I having worked with you, I just, you know, again, that is such a key piece of why I think you're a great leader, is that you build those relationships by developing them and sharing them, your stories and your journey. So
yeah, the relationship building piece is, you can't underscore it enough. I think when people come in with a title, they automatically think that there's going to be a respect from the people around you, that, you know, leadership's going to come easy, your decisions are going to be perfect. And it's not until you really build that relationship and you really understand what's going on and the people that are around you and your team, that you're able to be an effective leader. I say it every single time we bring somebody on, and even when we're interviewing, to understand what relationship building means to those people.
That's interesting to ask, because you've identified, and I totally agree with you. And I think that was probably a topic of the podcast when we had you on before, was around relationships. Because the thing that I remember in my head is, it's not that you're inviting someone over for Christmas dinner, but there is some, you know, engagement, relationship, that it's beyond the person that shows up at work. There's connections that are being made beyond that. But I look back on it and think about, and we'll go back to the story that you were talking about, because the other part that stood out for me around relationships is there was someone that saw something in you, the physician leader, and cared enough. So there had to have been a relationship there, right? They cared enough to say, hey, you know, you matter. I see potential in you. Read this. And I think my gut is if you didn't respect the person that gave you the book, I don't know that you would have taken it to heart like you did.
Absolutely. And I think you can't, again, underscore that enough to say, if you are building those relationships and you're really understanding what's going on with the people around you, they are even going to show up differently. So if they know that you have an understanding of what's going on with them, and again, nobody's going to anybody's house for Christmas, but if you understand that maybe they struggle with a certain area of their work, or they're just struggling, period, to even get to work, I think that helps you then understand what your next step is going to be as a leader, or even that person as a leader, because a lot of us are leaders of leaders. So walking that walk is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the organization. So you have directors that report to you. Is that the role that you have? Yeah. So, and it's an interesting thing that you just hit on, right? And so when I think about leadership, there's this, it's not really evolution, but I guess your leadership style evolves because this recognition that I'm not developing first-time leaders. I actually have people reporting to me who have leaders reporting to them, which is a different level of leadership, and you engage with your teams a little bit differently. And I think part of it is, I've had, so part of it is, I think you engage and share different levels of information with them, because I've had people that I coach comment as they've gone up in the organizational ranks, is that you get to a certain point and it's more about relationships as peers, even with someone that you're directly reporting to. Because you have a certain perspective of operations now, a certain perspective and view of the organization, that you can have those more candid conversations that you necessarily can't have with people that are brand new leaders, because they just don't have the experience or the optics to what's at the rest of the story, if you will.
And they really need to build themselves. So I think what you say is interesting, because the conversation that you have with another leader, a peer, is going to be very different than a brand new leader that comes in, because you want them to build their leadership savvy, their political capital, and you can't come in, and talking as if you've been there forever and you know the answers. And that's where that humble piece comes in, and that curious piece comes in, and it's really reaching people in a very humble and curious way. And even with the leaders that I speak to now, when we do one-on-ones, I don't want to know about how you're doing financially. I don't want to know about the quality metrics. I want to understand what's going on with the people that you support, and what's your role in their development. And if there's an issue, then let's talk about that, and how can I help you through that? That's more important to me, because everything else is going to come if everybody feels supported and they know, no matter what, the leaders that they report to are going to have their back and understand what they need to be successful.
Yeah. Kristi, talk a little bit more about your journey with curiosity. Because we talk about humble inquiry or being humble, and but it's sometimes foreign to people. Like, they'll say, but I do ask questions, and but they're asking close-ended questions, or they're asking my idea ? So tell us a little bit about your journey with curiosity and how it's developed.
Or leading. We're all really great at the leading questions. I always say, when you're going into a conversation, if you're asking the curious questions to understand where that person's at, that's going to help you through the conversation. A lot of us come into a conversation, you see what's in the subject line. I already have everything teed up as to how I want to respond to everything that's in that subject line. I try to encourage people to ask the curious, open-ended questions. What got you here? What's working? What's not working? How does this feel? What does success look like? And once you understand what the other person is thinking, or what the team is thinking, that's going to help you as a leader navigate through that meeting, or wherever it is, the situation that you're in, and be able to be more effective. Because if you come in with your preconceived, notion of what's going to happen, we know that doesn't work. That's the meeting's not going to end well, or it's going to be a meeting about another meeting, and then you're going to leave going, what did we accomplish? I tell people to take that home and use it on their family. When your kids walk up to you and say something, ask those humble questions. How did you get here? What happened? Tell me the story, to really understand where your child is coming from. And that helps you then to relate when you get to work.
Yeah, it's so funny when I hear that, because especially with kids or just humans, other humans, right? Is that we can assume a shared meaning. in a word or something else. And then what happens is we're building on that assumption of what that is. And we're often going, and we got a whole house that, is over an ocean and not really built on a solid foundation. But that's where my brain went when you were talking, is curiosity and humble inquiry. So I want to go back to that for a minute, because inside my head when you were talking, I thought about Huey Yang and the work that he did with your team went on. I think Huey's going to be so freaking proud, right? Because you were evolving anyway, and then all that. But what's been your journey, like Roko said, around, curiosity? But when you look back, even, I want to say 3 years ago, 4 years ago, what stands out for you around that and your leadership journey, around those things that you're talking about? A lot of it is because I think you've always been great at relationships. But is there a standout or something that comes to mind for you around curiosity and being humble inquiry, if you will, and that evolution for you, or how it's changed?
Yeah, I think what I would say when I look back in that humble or being curious is, I go back to a conversation that I was going to have with a clinician, and I knew what the subject was. And I went into it thinking, this is how I want to address the situation. And maybe the clinician got a couple of words out, and then I immediately came in with what my mindset was. And the conversation went really bad. And then once, stepped away and kind of came back to it, I would say a couple of weeks later, and I'm gonna come out this a little different. I'm gonna talk about it a little different. I want to seek to understand where this clinician's coming from. Then I have a great relationship with that clinician moving forward. And that was kind of an aha moment for me to say, this is what I need to do every single time, even if it means I have to ask a couple more questions that I would normally, or it slows the process down, which is really hard for people because this slows the process down. However, the outcome is worth it. If it takes you a few more minutes or a half an hour more, it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. Close the door, put your phone down, be in the moment, be curious, and really seek to understand what that person is thinking and where they're coming from. Changes everything.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Roko.
I was just gonna say, I just love that story because it really demonstrates when you come locked and loaded with how you're going to do something, as opposed to being curious, you create this environment where it's a defense. You're defending your space, and you're not leaving the conversation for exploration. And all innovation and problem solving, it's a requirement to explore, because nobody has that crystal ball to say this is the thing, right? So that exploration piece of problem solving or communicating is so critical, and your story just demonstrated that so well about, when you ask those closed-ended questions, or you come in with preconceived notions, you've already created this box. This is, I have to defend my position.
And the person comes in defending too. So you start defending, they start defending, and then you might as well forget it.
Yeah, the line's been drawn.
Yep.
Oh, firmly. And so the thing that it reminded me of is I was with a client the other day, and I don't know if I shared this with you, Roko, but she referred to going into this conversation with this person, armoring up, right? She had to armor up when she went into this conversation with someone because of just the interaction or whatever it was. And it reminded me of that, Kristi, when you were talking about that thing, because as we start forming what our position is, or how we're going to discuss it, or how we're going to approach it, right, without an open mind, there's some similarities, right, to essentially armoring up. Okay, I got all my gear, I'm ready to go climb the mountain, I'm gonna, do all this stuff, which means doesn't leave me open to do anything else. And I think when we do that, we close ourselves off to even touching or being connected to what the other person's hearing, feeling, saying, because we literally have a closed mind at that point. This is what I'm going to say. This is the desired outcome. And there's no room for another perspective. And what happens in that case is we aren't allowing ourselves to hear. The other person 100% feels the energy that we walked into the room with, or the conversation, very close, very determined, this is going to be it. And you made the comment that, you know, people may be hesitant because it takes a little bit more time with the questions and all that stuff. But my brain went to, you're going to spend the time somewhere. Right? So it's going to take you less time. Had you done that approach in the first conversation, then the time that you spend the first conversation, the time in between, and the time going back to recover it, had the approach been my gut that way based on your learning in the first time. So for me, it's like, are we really spending more time?
Right. Well, and you both feel good. So now if you're spending a little bit more time, you walk out of the room going, wow, that actually went really well. And the next time's going to be a little bit better. The next time's even going to be better. Whereas to your point, not only you might have gotten through it pretty quickly, but now it didn't go well. And it's going to take many more not going well meetings before it goes well. And so that takes a toll on any person to have to come in with the armor on and do that over and over and over again. So not only is it that you're going to take more time in the long run, it's your own mental health it's going to take a toll on you to have to show up like that.
Yeah.
Well, I love it.
I know we kind of already shifted from curiosity to this, but it's kind of related. And I just want to, you know, there was a time when I rounded with you and your team, and you were showing up in that humble leadership, and you talked about setting intention for, you know, you went around the room and asked everyone in the room what was the intention that they set for themselves. And afterwards, I asked you the question, you know, why did you ask that question? And it was because you had set an intention for yourself to learn something new about your team's problem solving thinking. And I thought that was so powerful. And so I wanted to talk more about that, and like, what got you to that space? Because again, I think it aligns with that curiosity piece of your leadership style.
And the evolution of her leadership style.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny because yesterday was our call to continuous improvement day, and we always start with what's your intent for the day. And you know, when you have, one of the main reasons we do it as leaders, our minds are going a million miles an hour. So to come into a room where we're we're really intentionally looking at problem solving or continuous improvement and having to shut everything else out, getting everybody to sit, be centered, and really think about how they're going to show up, it puts everybody in that mindset of, oh, now we're shifting from what just was outside of that door and that craziness to really looking at how we want to tackle this, process improvement, or what does continuous improvement mean to us, and how do I want to be? Am I going to be a coach? Am I going to be an observer? How does the process owner want to show up? So I think it really helps center everyone to whatever it is that you're focusing on.
I love that. It goes back to Roko's favorite frickin' word and topic is intentionality. Roko loves intentionality.
I do.
And I have to agree, because as leaders shift from, to your point, Kristi, you'll go from thing to thing to thing, right? And so if you've had a less than ideal interaction in this thing over here, and you're going on to the next thing, how do you transition yourself so that you don't bring it forward with you, right? And so part of it is grounding, centering, set the intention for the next meeting, letting go of whatever negative stuff. Otherwise, that just impacted everything else from that point forward. There's a lot of power in that. The other thing that I'll call out, and I I appreciate your time, but I remember one of the first times that I engaged with you, and I think it was Gemba rounds. So Gemba, going to the workplace, seeing what's happening on the front lines. And I hadn't experienced you as a leader before, and you were over one site, I think, one clinic. And the conversation was around, as you're going to frontline, you know, and seeing in the clinics, how are people on the front line translating and making connections to the top of the house and the goals that are set. And so one of the financial goals that most organizations have is EBITDA, right? That's a measurement that you have around success around finance. Well, frontline people in a clinic are not going to translate EBITDA. I mean, it's like they have no idea how they can impact EBITDA. So frontline individual contributors. What I appreciated was your comment and your highlight, and I've seen it in several other ways of examples that you've done, is said, you know, basically we brought everyone around and said, okay, how can we impact it? Well, we can impact it by knowing, and I'm drawing from memory, Kristi, looking at the schedule for the next day of the physicians and saying, hey, do we need all the staff? What does that look like? Here's the appointments for the next day. Here's everyone's schedule. Do we have an opportunity for people to just volunteer to flex off? There's direct impact to EBITDA, right? The income statement, by having your team realize there's a relationship between resources and the revenue or the services that we need to support the next day, and being able to think that way and not trying to think of EBITDA, what is it? How do we impact it? And I thought it was just beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge for some leaders is, you know, we do have these top level goals and metrics that as a MA or a front desk check in PSR make zero sense. But everything that we all do affects that overarching goal or metric. So, you know, to your point, whether it's flexing staff or it's even what's my role in supplies and supply management, filling the schedule, calling patients, and you know, so patients don't no show. So whatever it is, that all, if you as a leader can connect that, then that's impactful. What you did by filling the schedule had this effect on our finances. I think that's important. But to say to somebody, go out and fix cost per TRVU, they're going to look at you like you have 10 heads.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they don't recognize any of them.
Nope, makes no sense. And then nothing's going to get done, and then you have accomplished nothing. So you've set everybody up for failure because nobody's accomplishing anything because it's not within their control.
But it's, I think it's one of those things, and then we'll wrap up. But when I think about that, I think about you've taken it down to it radically different from the leader that you first stepped into as a leader, right? And not understanding what people need, not meeting people where they're at, not necessarily translating, because the reality of it is you freaking didn't have the skills yourself, right? But you go from that to, you know, at the point that I met you and you're developing that awareness in other leaders and to be able to do that, but to say, you know what, I recognize that at this level of the organization or this role that you're doing, you don't have exposure to all this other stuff. So what does it look like to translate what that is into a language, a task, or whatever that you can understand? And I think that underlies everything, the foundation of who you are, Kristi. And I think you may have said it's respect for people, which is just, it's who you are. I mean, you live and breathe it. And it shows up in all these different ways, whether humble inquiry, whether through curiosity, you know, whether through the emotional intelligence that you do, how you engage with your individual teams. You were the only leader that I knew that took your leaders and you had a finance day in your team meeting so they could understand finance. This stuff matters. So I think part of it too is these little things that you've done, little, haha. But it's those individual intentional things that it's all part of the bigger puzzle, but you take the time to think about it. And I think if you didn't show up with curiosity, then you wouldn't have the thoughts to fill the gaps that you discover.
I agree completely. And I think that curiosity piece, when you're showing up too, then you can help develop that person. So whether it's a leader or it's a MA or it's a nurse, whatever, you show up, then you're helping to develop that person into the person they want to become. Doesn't have to be a leader. They might just want to be the best RN that they can possibly be. So if you're curious about where they're at and where they want to go, then you're helping them to be successful, and they will stay with you. I have employees that have been with me for 15 years.
Yeah.
And that to me means everything in the world. And then I have people that are no longer with me because they've promoted into other roles, which is, I mean, that to me is just the best thing that you can have as a leader.
Yeah. Proud mama moment.
Oh yeah.
Proud mama moment. It's like, go for it. Be free.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good luck.
I love it. Kristi, thank you. Roko, thank you. Kristi, the question I have for you is what are one or two things out of this topic of lessons in leadership around humble inquiry, curiosity, relationship, everything else we talked about? What are one or two things that you want people to walk away with?
I want people to walk away with the art of slowing down, and really taking the time to understand the person that's in front of them, regardless of who that person is. So if you can really slow down and say, I'm really, really interested in how you are today and what you're dealing with today, it will change your life. It will change that day. It will change, the future for you. Slow down, take the time to understand where people are at, be curious, be humble, and want to build that relationship with those people.
I love that. Thank you. Roko, what's on your mind?
Yeah, so if I synthesize those traits that Steve talked about, to me it's take the time to develop yourself so that you can develop others, because to me a leader's role is all about developing others, the capabilities of others. But you have to develop yourself in order to do that. And the stories that you shared with us all started with your own development and has led to you sharing and developing others. So
I agree. And I'm like bobbleheading here on the the thing that stands that comes, I mean, there's a lot that stands out for me. The thing that you haven't necessarily touched on or have, and not in explicit words, is I think the recommendation I would have, or the thing to take away from leaders, is don't judge yourself. Look back at, because I look at you at the point that you were at, and for you to look back at that, and it takes courage to say, I didn't even like who I was. I didn't want to be around me at that time. But not only did you do that, you didn't hide it in a corner someplace. You boldly bring it forward as evidence to the other leaders of, you always have a choice. You always have a choice. And for me, that's super powerful, Kristi. And I encourage other people to do it. And I think we had one that was like, don't let failure define you. It shapes you. And so even though you were that person in that moment, you're not that person. You weren't that person after you made the decision to leave. And I think that's the thing that stands out for me, is the courage that you have in sharing that journey. And I encourage other leaders to do the same thing, which is just what this thing is about, right? What are those lessons? And so anyway, thank you. I greatly appreciate it. And anytime you want to come back, just ping us, because I freaking love chatting with you.
I know. I'll be here tomorrow.
Okay.
Good. The Kristi, Roko, and Michelle podcast.
Right.
And we'll have other guests on. You're awesome. So thank you. Until next time, this is Leadership Soundbites with Roko, Michelle, and Kristi Beaufore, and
Beaufore.
Beaufore. Yes.
And beautiful four.
Beaufore. Yeah, Beaufore. I said it wrong the first time. I'm just gonna say Kristi.
There you go. Problem solved.
Okay, there you go. I've iterated. Thank you. Until next time. Have a great one.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.